Well, hello. Welcome to this special takeover episode of Words and Nerds. We're taking over Danny V's amazing channel today for a special episode. We're here. It's our episode. So I'm Nick Wasiliev. Usually you can catch me on another show on this channel titled Date with a Debut, but I'm especially excited because I get to chat about a brand new book from Daniel Tamone. His debut, The Fists of the Father, published by Bonnier Echo, came out in July 2024. We will discuss this book. We'll dive into it. We'll discuss some mild spoilers and plot points. We won't spoil the ending. But if you're listening, I recommend you can get a copy right now down in the description or check it out in your local library, or at least very soon after listening to this episode. And lastly, before we begin, I will add this book discusses topics of domestic violence and suicide. If this is something that's affecting you, I strongly recommend you contact Lifeline 13 11 14. That number again, 13 11 14. Help is available to you. So with that in mind, Daniel, welcome to the Words and Nerds channel.
Thanks very much, Nick. Great to be here. Big fan of the show. So, yeah, very thrilled to be on.
It's a pleasure to have you on, and it's great to talk about this amazing book. For everyone who's kind of watching the visual side, I have the cover now up on the screen. Let's first of all start off by talking a little bit about yourself. You live on the Central Coast. You're just up the coast from me. You're father of 3 children. You work in financial services. But initially, when you kind of reached out to me, we kind of had a bit of a connection to rugby, of course. You played several seasons at the Parramatta Two Blues in the Sydney Shoot Shield competition. And I just find it so funny. In this job that I do, there is, funnily enough, only been a couple of overlaps with rugby and creative literary writing spaces. People don't necessarily get that connection immediately. Out of curiosity, where does writing sit for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, obviously played a lot of rugby during my time, and writing was something I always enjoyed. Coming through, school in English class, and wasn't probably until maybe 5 or 7 years ago I started dedicating a bit more time to it. A global pandemic would help when you couldn't go outside much, or within a certain radius of your home. So that's where I just had a bit more time to really dedicate to putting a few ideas together, and really found it a lot of fun. And so, yeah, it kind of just took off from there, and something I'm really grateful for in a way, even though the pandemic wasn't much fun on other fronts.
It's so amazing how many amazing books and storytellers came out of that period in the pandemic. We always were kind of all like, we were sitting at home, we had nothing to do, and then all of a sudden, boom, an interest that suddenly you wouldn't have necessarily thought of just kind of sprouted up out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's right. I guess I always had this idea of what I thought would make a really great movie. There's a lot of great movies about sort of boxers and different stories, both fictional and based on past boxers. And yeah, I thought this idea would be a good movie, but I think, how do you go about writing a movie script? I got no idea, but I think writing a book was something a bit more adjusted to my skill set, and somehow I managed to pull it off with a lot of help along the way.
I will say, like, before I kind of dived into the book itself, thank you very much for sending a copy through. I checked out the reviews, and people loved this book. Like, anyone who has checked out this book, it has a really positive reaction. And the one thing that really stood out to me, the first thing that I kind of did before I kind of dived into it, and before we kind of talk about the characters, is it's very clear that this is written by someone who loves sport. There's a lot of sport here. Obviously, of course, it's obvious, but you've played rugby. Boxing in this story particularly is very visceral. You're in it as a reader. We're seeing it from many different angles. We have the commentators, we've got news articles, third-person subjectivity as well, and you kind of ride the mental wave of the sport, which is something that I really connected with. For people who are kind of unfamiliar, it's not just the physical exertion that makes that sporting environment so exhausting. It's the mental element of sport and how you actually ride that whenever you're in that setting that is a major part of the challenge of professional sport. Out of curiosity, where does boxing sit for Daniel the person?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one I've got asked a lot. And I don't have a great amount of boxing experience myself, other than around maybe when I was 14 or 15. Spent a bit of time just going down to the Hornsby PCYC with a few friends after school, and I really enjoyed it, and I loved it. And it's something that I guess if I wasn't playing rugby, I would have liked to have dedicated more time to. Probably a good thing I didn't in terms of the ongoing effects of concussion and things that get mentioned in the book. But it's not something I'm particularly an expert on. I do follow it quite closely. It's a fantastic sport, and always so much drama, and it's such a big build up, which I try to play on in the novel. But yeah, you're right. The reviews have been great, but I am kind of waiting one day if some sort of boxing expert comes in and picks apart some of the scenes and say, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. You wouldn't throw a hook after an uppercut or something. But I think I know enough to, at least convince people who aren't experts that I know what I'm talking about.
It kind of maybe it's just my own head. I've not done much boxing either myself, but I have played a lot of rugby. And there is kind of that emotional element of the physical and mental exertion that you've got to do, which I think is there's kind of a similarity to it. There's a part, where Ted has to really go hell for leather in many of these particular boxing fights that he's going to go for, and it kind of felt very similar to when you catch the ball and you're the second rower by nature, so you're usually the person taking some of the big hit ups or the big clean outs, and you've got to mentally prepare yourself to take either a big massive hit or some sort of thing that I just found myself really kind of connecting to it in a similar way. Also, just because I've had other members of my family who have done boxing on the regular and kind of described it in a very similar way, which is I think it's one of the things that I really loved about this book right off the bat, which is kind of why I have to give you your flowers about it because I don't know how you kind of bounce between those different methods, but it works so well in terms of the pressure that you actually really feel these characters under.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. And I got to admit, writing the boxing scenes was such a slog, and I, for the most part, didn't kind of enjoy the creative process because you're right. Like when you're just catching the ball off a kickoff in rugby or someone's passing it to you, there's so much happening in such a small amount of time. And so if you're trying to describe that, over the, a 3-second window of Teddy reacting to a punch that's coming at him and he's having flashbacks and the commentators are saying things, there's pages and pages of pages over a very small amount of time. Like I really love writing the dialogue between the characters and the scenes where, Teddy's having banter with his dad or his grandfather and the news reporters. Like that's so easy to write. I bang out those pages very quickly, but the boxing scenes and there's one, one of the big middle chapters is probably 3 times the length of every other chapter. It took me so long. It was just 1 page a day for a while, and thankfully it's people have pointed out in some of their reviews, and a lot of people that don't like boxing still really got hooked and drawn into it. I was worried that there might be too much actual in-ring action for some readers.
Mm, mm. So off the back of that, I mean, let's pan out a little bit before we kind of do the classic book elevator pitch, which we do on Date with the Debut. And this book came out in July 2024, so it's been out in the world. It's gone off and had a bit of a life of its own for a little while. Out of curiosity, what's been one of the funniest or most surprising reactions that you've had to this book? Because books go off and eventually have a life of their own, and you don't know where it goes. Like that's kind of one of the joys of it. It's like kind of like a child in a sense. Like they grow and then they leave the home. They spend all this time in your head, and then all of a sudden they're gone. Like, has there been a place where you've gone, "Oh, look, there's my book," or a reaction that surprised you?
Yeah, like I guess, one day, I just gone down to the local library just to try and get some work done while the kids were at home, and just needed a bit of quiet time, and I just walked through the doors, and there it was at the recommended section of the library. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, when I spoke at a Words on the Waves festival, a few people who I guess I may not have envisaged being the type of people to gravitate towards a sporting story about a young boxer just coming up and telling me how much they loved it. And to be honest, it's been a lot of females that have read it and really enjoyed it. And I think the male audience is quite difficult to crack. But it's a story about men predominantly, and the relationships between father, son, grandfather, and I'm still trying to figure out how I can crack the code of getting through to a few more blokes. So if you've figured out that's a secret recipe, Nick, maybe it's this podcast, but we'll wait and see.
It's so funny. When you kind of said that it's been mostly females, I'm actually not surprised at all. I had a very similar experience with my book, which is a bloke about a book about blokes in 2020 Sydney struggling to talk to each other. And funnily enough, the majority of the readers are female, who often are buying it either for a partner or for a partner, a son, whatever it may be, because they want to kind of get them to find a book that they want to enjoy. So I'm kind of, funnily enough, I'm not surprised in a weird way, but I also like the fact that that there are a lot of women, or even some of the reviews have kind of said, I was not a fan of boxing in any way, shape, or form, and this book explained it to me in a way that I could understand it, so I can see the value in it and the joy in it, but also the challenge, how actually hard it physically is, which is such an interesting part of it. So, without further ado, I reckon let's dive into it. Let's talk about it. The Kiss of the Father. Uh, in classic fashion, similar to my podcast date with a debut, I love to start this section with a classic elevator book pitch, and I think this is an appropriate place to do that. So I'm in the lift. You've walked in. We're going up. You've got the perfect time for an elevator book pitch. What is The Fists of the Father about?
Yeah, so The Fist of the Father is about a young boxer named Teddy, nicknamed Little Boy Blue. His father was a very successful heavyweight champion boxer, and he's basically following the same career path with a little bit less success, and living with a very strained relationship with his father. There's some ongoing issues with the family regarding domestic violence, and his father spent some time in jail, and he's basically trying to manage his own career while also dealing with all the background noise that comes with a life in the spotlight and living in your father's shadow. And at the same time, he's dealing with his own mental demons and effects of concussion from years of boxing. So there's a lot going on in his life, and he's trying to make his way through that on his terms, which isn't always easy.
Ding! Nailed it. Perfect. Like, such a good pitch. Love it. And you're absolutely right that there's so much stuff to talk about in this story. This is a book about guilt, about generational trauma, the impact of memory and the past, and how much you choose to kind of let it define you in a way. Um, this is a family and an environment that uses violence to resolve issues historically. And for Ted, he's kind of faced with a decision do I let this kind of continue in a way, shape, or form, or do I kind of walk away from such a violent legacy? First of all, it's a kind of a crux of this story, but kind of talk to me about the experience and the kind of turning to violence, because in this family and also in this environment particularly, it almost feels like it's a default setting. It makes it harder when you're someone like Ted. I felt so much sympathy for Ted, because it makes it even harder to kind of fight off and switch off that default approach.
Yeah, that's right. He's stuck in a bit of a cycle that he's not too sure how to get out of it. And ironically, part of the problem is his grandfather, and trying to protect him, is actually causing other areas of holding him back from achieving his goals. And when I set out to write the book, I actually didn't know exactly how it was going to end. I had in my idea a certain ending, but as I wrote it and developed the relationships with the characters, what I had in mind suddenly didn't seem natural. And I'm like, well, that's not actually how we would react to that. And so it was a really enjoyable experience for me to actually arrive at the ending I did. And I won't spoil it, but um, it it originally I had the sort of, Sylvester Stallone was directing Rocky 8 with Teddy Taylor and his father. It would end very differently to the way I did it, and part of it was putting myself in the character's shoes and trying to feel my way out of it, and how would you actually resolve it, and that was a very rewarding process in itself.
It's so funny that you mentioned kind of Sylvester Stallone, because when I shut my eyes and did some visualizing of it, I thought of like the wrestler or the Iron Claw, kind of that sort of a lot of those recent movies that are often portrayed boxing in such a way. But I want to talk about focus in on Ted, which really makes is where this story comes into its own. Ted is a great character. Just gonna say it off the bat right here. Very early on in this story when we first meet him, he's in the boxing ring, but he's someone we really gravitate to, particularly because a really haunting first chapter that you provide in the family home that really immediately gets you in his corner. Pardon the pun. Um, I kind of feel like he's got that Aussie battler mentality to him in a way, but it's counteracted so much by the fact that he's being manipulated on many fronts, and this is kind of because we're the reader and we're kind of looking at it with a little bit more of an outsider going in perspective. This is just his life. This is just something he's been dealing with. But like you mentioned, Pop has having a lot of other impacts in his life that he has to really start to pick up and notice. There's the kind of the generational pressure, relations with his dad, his management as well, in that too, but also ultimately kind of on himself. He puts a lot of pressure on himself as well because he feels like he has to live up to the stuff of the past, but also be this great, amazing boxer who is has the kind of feels like he has the weight of the world on his shoulders. Talk to me about Ted. Talk to me about this character.
Yeah, I guess he's got himself in a very sort of difficult spot, in that he's very good at what he does. It's in his blood. His grandfather was a boxer. His dad was the world heavyweight champion, and he's lived and breathed it. But he's always just grown up, with that association, and it's because his grandfather's trying to protect him and keep him in the middleweight, out of a fear that one day that the power brokers of the sport will do anything, I guess, to drive the viewers and sell tickets to the event, that they would try to manipulate Ted to stepping into the ring with his dad one day. And in doing that, it's causing ongoing issues for Ted, and he's feeling like he's not, being a success. He's putting himself through hell trying to, maintain these weights. It's having an impact on his relationships. And so he's got all these different forces trying to pull him in different directions. And it's not until something kind of outside that, being a love interest, just kind of allows him to step back and say, hey, like, what do I actually want from this? And, it actually, sets him off to a path that he never thought he would take. And that's actually reconciling, to some degree with his dad. Like, there's a lot of, history between them that, I don't know what part two has in store, but I don't think they'll ever fully, you know, bridge that gap completely. But that they get to a point where that they have a functional relationship again, and it's only because of him being able to take a step back, and actually realize how he's been manipulated, that he can navigate the way forward.
Yeah, that kind of relationship you talk about is so important in terms of getting perspective, because up until that point, I mean, because this book has a lot of stuff about men raising men. Um, and as you kind of allude to, it's good to highlight these two other male figures in Ted's life, his father, Ron, but also Ron's father, his pop, and kind of we mentioned it at the top, but I do want to kind of emphasize a small warning about the domestic violence that is kind of portrayed in this story, because it is definitely is visceral. This is a part of the daily family life. Ron was a boxer. He's a heavy drinker, as you kind of allude to. He spent some time in prison. But we also kind of learn about Pop, because Pop, he fought in the Vietnam War. And as many people know, the experience of not only then also the experience that many veterans got when they came home from Vietnam War was not a positive experience. It was they were kind of vilified and viewed in a negative way. And the pop boxing became an outlet to send those demons and traumas. And that, by extension, you kind of feel that also plays a major factor in the shaping of Ron, of his father. The more you kind of kind of felt very conflicted about these two, because in a way, at the end, you do feel a little bit of sympathy as you learn more and more about the challenges. But part of me also kind of felt to me like, Ron, see what's in front of you here with your son. Break the cycle here a little bit. But then again, that's me looking in. It's very hard to see what that in front of you. Tell me about Ron and Pop.
Yeah, no, it's great questions, and I went through the same thought process, and I was at a point wondering, I was like, are people really going to, buy this? Are people really going to be able to get behind Ron, in particularly, given his history and what he's done? Because when you first read it, it is pretty unforgivable, right? But he's been through prison. He's been through his rehab, and he's, I guess, doing what he can in the way that he knows how, and he kind of stumbles his way through it in some ways, but I think by the end he is somewhat redeemed, at least in Ted's eyes, in that it wasn't easy for him, because he didn't have it easy growing up either, and that leads to Pop, Ron's father, Ted's grandfather, who, like you said, he was a Vietnam vet, and that, as you alluded to, those guys had it extremely tough, and to come home from that war and be thrust into fatherhood, splits with his wife, and has to raise a son on his own, and dealing with his own demons, and the only bond they really have is boxing, and that's all Ted really has with Ron at some point as well. But then, ironically, it is that bond that is the one string at one point that's tying them together. But from that, that's quite poetic. I like that. I should have used that. It helps to exactly. That helps to bring them back together a little bit closer. I'm glad you called that out, because you've got to you can't just write people off sometimes. It's hard to give people a chance, but it's the only thing you can do is try to make up for things, right?
I think you nail it by the whole description of him kind of very much stumbling through it after his journey, Ron, because you're absolutely right. When you have the things that these two that one has done to the other, the exposures that they've had in these environments, um, that, that have led to them reacting the way they have. It's sometimes the best thing that the only real thing you can achieve is understanding, even if and it's also a case of you can't necessarily change what you've done and the mistakes you've made in the past, but at least it is what it is. We can try forward with what we have. It's so complex and it's so loaded. It's why I kind of find that dynamic so fascinating in this particular story. It's challenging and it's ugly in a lot of instances, because of just the nature of how brutal this connection is between them.
Yeah, and the ironic thing is, like, Ron's in some ways quite, not naive, not to his situation, but just to the world. He's almost in his own little bubble in some regards. And my favorite scene is at the end where, they're walking into the ring, and Ron's organized to play over the speakers, the little boy blue, the man on the moon song. And
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
like, yeah, they call you little boy blue, and that's your nickname. I put this song on. He's got no idea what that song's actually about. And it's actually the little spatterings of humor throughout the novel, is often driven from Ron. And I think that
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
little bit of a risk on my part. It hopefully just played off and help, just soften the reader's perception of him.
That's such a good thing to shout out. I will say that despite the intense subject matter, you have those great moments of light. I must admit that did like make me absolutely piss myself with laughter because it was just like you could see he was trying. You could see he was trying so much, but considering this particular fight in question is such a pivotal moment near the end of the story, and there's such a build up and intensity to it. To suddenly have that kind of come through is such a tension breaker, such a critical moment of joy that we have right at the end of the story, which is just so valuable. Um, Off the back of that, his journey comes with many challenges, and as you kind of allude to, there's another element as well. He's kind of feeling the impact of years and years of boxing, many concussions, many impacts on his brain, um, and having experienced concussion on many times myself. When you go through it, it comes with it's such a ride. There's so many low points. You feel depressed, you feel down, and it feels like a hole you can't get out of. But then you throw all the extra stuff in on top because it threatens this sort of stuff can threaten to end his career. And it adds even more pressure. And tell me about creating the impacts of such violent, sports on the page, particularly the nature of concussions and stuff, because it felt really visceral in this story.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess concussion, it's everywhere now. Particularly as a fan of rugby league and rugby union, it's every game that's being spoken about. And even guys like you and me, not playing at that top level. But yeah, I've had my share of concussions as well. And you think back to when that happened, and there was just that mentality of, oh well, it's happened. You got to keep going for the team. So I think it's great how things have progressed. And James Graham, who used to play for the Bulldogs and England in rugby league's got a great podcast on it, that talks about his journey post retirement and what he's gone through. And it's a fascinating listen. I highly recommend it. And I guess I was able to some degree draw on my own experience, but Ted's is a lot more extreme. And the unfortunate thing about CTE is you're really not going to know the full effects till later on in life. And I think being a young professional athlete, particularly a boxer, that's a huge thing to have hanging over your head. Like, what is the trade-off? Between the going through things, Muhammad Ali's situation played out for the world to see, and it just breaks your heart. And I kind of found a way just to briefly segue that into the book at one point, where you relive that moment where Muhammad Ali's trying to light the Olympic torch. And that was just, even for me at such a young age and not really understanding things, that was just heartbreaking. This guy that was once so charismatic and enthusiastic, and really is the reason why boxers get paid $50 million a fight these days, because he just skyrocketed the global interest. And I try to put the reader in Ted's head, because it's very easy for people to say, well, why would you be a boxer? Why would you play rugby league? Why would I let my kids do this, when, they're going to, go through that? Well, there's something just ingrained in people. There's a competitive nature and a love of sport, and it's so delicate and difficult to explain. But hopefully people on that other side of the fence can read this book and just kind of think, well, yeah, I can get why Teddy wants to do this. He's the best at it in the world. He can make a life for himself. And, it's not about the money and the fame, but it's about just following your passion and being able to live a dream and to push yourself and do something that not many other people can even come close to even achieving. So, it's very topical and a very sort of delicate topic to manage. And I don't know what the answer is for sport.
Yeah, it's big topics and big discussions that we kind of are talking about here. And off the back of that, you've sat with this story for a while. And again, no spoilers. There is, a key part of this story that kind of leads to breaking whether Ted can break the cycle or not. But you've sat with this story for a while. Big themes, challenging subject matter, themes about those domestic abuse, the struggles that men face. And I'm curious, out of curiosity, what did writing The Fists of the Father teach you? Be it Daniel, the human, Daniel, the author, anything. What did this creative exercise and sitting with this story all the way back in, pandemic times, all the way through to now? What did this exercise teach you?
Yeah, well, hopefully it taught me that, there's ways that you can, work through, some really, deep-seated, family or friend issues, and that, while it's a fictional story, I really put myself into these people's shoes, and I changed what was happening based on how I feel their genuine reactions would be. And yeah, so hopefully that it just taught me that, no matter what happens, that there's always a path to forgiveness and reconciliation, that, if you can get both people, to the table working towards it, that you can get there.
That's a great answer to that question, and it's good that, because often it can, even when it can seem like there's no hope in hell of fixing or resolving an issue, it's good to know that even with that, there are still ways forward. There's still ways to try and find some sort of reconciliation, because in the end, I think that's, despite the challenges that we all come across and the challenges we all face in life, that's kind of what we're all searching for in the end. It's kind of a universal human experience in a way.
No, thank you. That's very kind of you.
Out of curiosity, will you write again? Will there be is there another story? Has this kind of galvanized kind of a writing itch that needs to be scratched? Will we see more?
Yeah. I hope so. Yeah, I've got a few ideas. It is difficult to find the time. So if another pandemic rolls around, I'll be right onto it. But yeah, definitely plan to, got things that, the creative juices are flowing on. It's very easy to start writing. It's hard to finish something, as you would know. So it's about being disciplined in the approach, and sort of dedicating some time, but trying to enjoy it along the way. So hopefully we're doing this again on a different topic, but I don't think it'll be Fists of the Father 2. We'll find something else to do.
I certainly hope so, because I think what you have really nailed in this story is a fantastic voice, a fantastic examination. You've got the way your ability to jump between those different viewpoints and headspaces is so great. And I do hope that there's another story in there. As a final question for this podcast, I usually like to ask this at the end of Date with the Debut episodes too, but it's a question that I always like to ask an author or a guest. And simply put, are you happy?
Yeah, I am. I haven't quit my day job off the back of any of the Fist of the Father commercial success, and I never plan to. But no, I feel like it's a great achievement and great to be able to say I did it, and just for the amount of kind words and reviews that I've got so far. I'd say it's worth a lot of hours spent in front of the keyboard. That just finishing it and reading it for myself, in itself is rewarding. So to be able to share it with others, yeah, that certainly makes me happy.
Yeah, I think you should be really proud of it. It's a fantastic book. It's a visceral book. It's an amazing book, and it brings you into this incredible experience. And I'm not surprised that it is going off and having the life that it has. Now, just imagine yourself, say, like in a random country in the middle of nowhere, and you find a Pacific island in the middle of nowhere, and you see a copy of it on a, you know, in a hotel library or something like that. A well-worn copy that's been well traveled and read many times. That's an experience. But yeah, you should be really proud of it. It's a great story.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I do hope to see it in all corners of the world. That would be great. Maybe on the big screen one day. Who knows?
Well, look, you definitely feel that visual element to it, and there's definitely a visual part to those amazing boxing scenes. So who knows? But for everyone listening, The Fist of the Father is published by Bonnier Echo. You can get a copy down in the description. You can also check it out in your local library if you haven't had the chance to. If you like books and book podcasts, you can check out me on Date with a Debut, where I chat with debut novelists and discuss their books and journey to publication. And if you like Words and Nerds as well, drop Words and Nerds a review. Leave us 5 stars or a thumbs up. There's so many amazing shows, so many amazing authors on here. Of course, the amazing Danny V leads the show as well. But wherever you are listening, thank you for listening to us, and thank you for supporting Australia's incredible book industry. We'll catch you again soon with another Takeover episode. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on and talking about The Fist of the Father.
Thanks very much, Nick. Pleasure to be here.